After Canada walked out of trade talks with the United States at 1 minute to midnight on Friday, Prime Minister Mark Carney concluded a press conference with this exchange.
Why does it feel like today Mark Carney is going to war? Trade war. The tone.
Because we were attacked. Like you're at war when you get attacked. We got attacked.
The only thing that wasn't clear from Carney's remarks is what the war is actually all about. Well, Julian Assange had an answer ready. He posted, Carney suspended trade talks to influence the U.S. midterm elections. Carney takes his marching orders from the DNC. He's betting the entire farm on the Democrats taking control of Congress. Well, Assange is onto something the entire corporate press missed, because this was never about tariffs. Mark Carney doesn't take his marching orders from the DNC. He answers to something much higher up the food chain. And the man in Washington who actually understands the war Carney is fighting is at the Treasury Department, and his name is Scott Bessent. I'm Susan Kokinda, and I've been tracking Mark Carney's role in protecting the imperial system all the way back to his role as Canadian and British central banker to Prime Minister today. So if you want to follow that, hit those like, share, and subscribe buttons so we can stay in touch and expand our reach. Here's what I'm going to cover today. First, how the trade fight isn't really about trade. Second, the operation Carney has built to reach over the president's head and into the midterm elections. And third, the deeper war that Scott Bessent is fighting, the one Carney is praying you never notice. So on Friday night, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney pulled his negotiators out of trade talks with the United States and called them home. President Trump just put this truth out. Canada has been ripping off the United States of America for years. They are among the worst nations in the world to deal with. They feel entitled, and yet we don't need Canada. They need us. They do 95% of their business with the U.S., and with us, it's the exact opposite. Then, a few minutes ago, Jameson Greer, our trade representative, explained what happened.
Just remember how we started with all of this. The Canadians over a year ago, they prohibited the sale of American wine and spirits in their stores. They put limits on how many autos could go into Canada. And even before that, they restricted the sale of U.S. dairy into Canada. So lots of new and long-standing issues with Canada. After about a year of asking them to eliminate these, they said no. So we proposed some very tailored tariffs covering about 5% of what they send us. The Canadians came to us about a month ago. They said we'd like to negotiate, and we did, and they did. We progressed to a point Tuesday night where we had enough agreement among the parties to announce that we had found the way to a deal. Then we set about to finalize it, and then in the last hours, I think there were things that the Canadians just, they wanted more. We offered them the best access to the United States of any country in the world. They wanted more. I don't know if it was political for them. It certainly doesn't make economic sense, but perhaps for political reasons.
Note what he said about Canadian retaliation, because earlier this summer, as this round of trade disputes escalated, Greer reminded Americans that Canada was the only country besides China that had retaliated against President Trump's tariffs. The only country beside China. This is not a friendly neighbor to our north. This is Mark Carney's Canada. And this is the same Canada whose industry minister said last month that Canada would use industrial policy as a weapon, and she gave it a name, geo-industrialization. That's the economic version of the British Empire's geopolitics, which manipulates countries to keep the globalists politically in control. Canada is now deploying its economic policy not for the benefit of Canadians, but for the same purpose. Keep the globalists in control. And that is the only thing that makes any sense. Listen to economic strategist James Thorne. Canada cannot win a trade war with its largest trading partner. It could not plausibly inflict equivalent damage to an economy many times its size while remaining so dependent on access to that market. The U.S. still takes roughly 72% of Canadian goods exports. 72%. And the vulnerabilities run deeper than just raw size. Take energy. Carney is running around the world flexing Canada's energy production muscles, touting growing exports to Asia. But it turns out that 60% of Quebec's refinery supply comes from Western Canada through pipelines that go through the United States. Do you really want to provoke a fight with a country that your own fuel travels through? Critical minerals and metals are worse. Canada has them in abundance, but doesn't process them. It ships them to China or the United States, then buys the finished product back. Aluminum and steel are right in the middle of this fight. The U.S. put 50% tariffs on them. Greer says Washington offered to slash those tariffs dramatically. Carney said no. Again, economically insane. Why did Carney do it? He did exactly what Julian Assange said. He blew up the talks to influence the midterm elections. Now, regular followers of Promethean Action will not be surprised by this, because we have been exposing Mark Carney's role as the empire's point man against Donald Trump since both of them came into office in early 2025. If you're not a subscriber, now is a good time to get our free newsletter and stop being surprised. The link is in the description. So while Carney lectures the world about Canadian sovereignty and rallying the middle powers of the world into some kind of new alliance, his real assignment is simpler: rescue the empire's globalist system from Donald Trump. And to do it, he has built a strike force aimed straight at the United States. So what does it mean to influence the midterms? It's the economy. This administration is running an economic revolution, pulling manufacturing and supply chains back home, rebuilding the kind of country where one income can raise a family again. J.D. Vance laid that out in Middletown, Ohio last week. But that takes time, and many, many Americans are still suffering from decades of globalist looting. So the globalists are doing everything they can to delay the turnaround and to throw new disruptions into the mix. Carney's trade war is one of them. And Carney has a team in place which has ties with or is working directly with Democrats in the United States. Let's start with Maya Johnson. She's an American and a Democratic operative who worked on Hillary Clinton's 2016 campaign against Donald Trump and subsequently was tied to both the Biden and Harris campaigns. In February, she became a senior advisor to Carney with the title United States Stakeholder Strategy. And in July, she was promoted. Carney created a new position of Chief Operating Officer for her. So who else is involved in this U.S. stakeholder strategy? Well, there's Chrystia Freeland. Freeland took time off from her current unpaid volunteer position as Canada's Special Economic Envoy to Ukraine. Yes, Ukraine. To comment on the current trade war with the U.S. She praised Carney for pushing this to the point of rupture and cited her own experience in negotiating the USMCA in 2018 when she was foreign minister. In an interview with Bloomberg yesterday, she urged Carney to pursue the strategy she used back then.
I think it's so important for Canada to make the case beyond the White House. In 2018, we called it the donut strategy. And I think Team Canada now really needs to go out and explain that to Americans.
The donut strategy. Go around the president straight to the American public. Then there's Industry Minister Melanie Joly, who announced Canada's geo-industrial strategy at Chatham House last month. In that speech, she admitted that she is touring the United States, meeting with, in her own words, mostly Democrats. And so, right on cue, the Democrats jumped in to denounce Trump's actions. Chuck Schumer charged that Trump's chaotic trade wars are bleeding the American people dry. Pete Buttigieg said, whether it's a trade war with Canada or an actual war with Iran, the pattern is the same. Americans are paying for the president's choices. So line it up. Carney installs a Democratic operative to run his U.S. strategy. He blows up trade talks that make no economic sense for Canada. His former finance minister goes on record describing a strategy to go over the president's head and rally Americans against him. And his current industry minister is meeting with Democrats. And right on cue, American Democrats deliver the script. This is not a coincidence. Now, before I get to Scott Bessent, let's look at one other foreign official tip his hand from a very different quarter. Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi posted this on X. The so-called economic D-Day is a diversion from America's own crisis unprecedented debt and surging interest costs. Now, Aragshi accompanied that with an article pointing to the $40 trillion national debt, which blamed Trump's policies for exacerbating it. So you have an Iranian foreign minister and a Canadian prime minister counting on American economic problems and instabilities, which is where Scott Bessent comes in. Imperial policy has always rested on one thing: control of money. And the more money you create, the more you control. The result is a mountain of debt and a huge global financial bubble. In the meantime, the real industrial and productive base of the United States and most of the world has been gutted. So this administration has two jobs. The first is to rebuild what was gutted by returning to the American system of Alexander Hamilton, a system where wealth and progress are based on what you produce. Tariffs are an integral part of the American system, ensuring that vital manufacturing and production are protected from hostile competition, whether it comes from Beijing or Ottawa. That's the war. And when Carney calls it a war, he's right. It's a war against globalism, the modern-day British system. And he knows exactly which side he's on. But here's the second job, and it's the one that nobody is talking about. How do you deflate a financial bubble this size without blowing up the world economy in the process? Now, one of the fuses wired into that bubble is the yen carry trade. It emerged as a financial tool around the same time as NAFTA. Not a coincidence. Here's how it works. For over 2 decades, hedge funds parked in the City of London or the Cayman Islands have borrowed Japanese yen for near zero interest rates and then flipped it into higher-yielding assets. Pure hot money. Now Japan is trying to unwind that, but to do that, they need to unload U.S. long-term bonds, which can force Treasury rates up. That's the surging interest costs that Aragshi was gloating about. Now, Bessent's job is to help the Japanese unwind without dumping huge amounts of treasuries and pushing interest rates up, interest rates which include your mortgage. Again, think about the economic pain that the empire wants to inflict as we go into the midterms. So what does Bessent do? He didn't wait around for the bomb to go off. He's carrying out direct interventions to manage this potentially explosive unwinding. And his newest action was to use the FIMA, the Foreign and International Monetary Authority facility. It lets foreign central banks swap their treasury bonds for cash instead of dumping them on the open market. And he wants the FIMA to be made bigger because he knows exactly how large this bubble is and what it will take to bring it down safely. This is exactly why President Trump brought a man who worked for George Soros on board as Treasury Secretary. Trump didn't hire him in spite of that. He hired him because of it. Bessent knows how these bombs got built, and now he's defusing them. So this is what the Canada fight is really all about. 2 systems in mortal combat. Carney's British imperial system on one side, Hamilton's American system on the other. Carney knows it, and that's why he calls it a war, which is why he and his controllers are betting everything on the midterms. They're hoping that enough Americans still hurting, still waiting, give up on Donald Trump before the turnaround arrives in force. They're counting on you not seeing the economic revolution which the president and his team are actually pulling off. Because if this revolution is allowed to finish, it means the end of the British imperial system once and for all. Promethean Action is committed to that mission and to making sure Americans understand it and make their decisions accordingly. If you want to be part of that, join us as a contributor or a supporting member. This has been your Monday Brief. Thanks for watching.